Hello, and welcome to the Write Club podcast, where we take you behind the pages and into the fascinating world of writing. I'm Beth, and this is Mary, and we're part of the team at Writing Magazine and Writers Online. Hi, Mary. How are you doing today?
I'm really well, thank you. Let me introduce our guest. Today we're talking to Danny Fontaine, aka the Pitch Guy. Danny coaches teams and pitches multi-million-dollar deals to the biggest brands in the world. His unique approach blends creativity, psychology, storytelling, and immersive experiences based on years of research and application. Danny also hosts the Pitch Masters podcast, where he interviews the masters of the advertising, sales, and marketing industries to find out how they win business. His book Pitch is out now. Danny, welcome to the Write Club podcast. Where are you joining us from today?
Hello, both. Absolutely lovely to be here. I am joining you from historic Colchester, although from my house.
It's a lovely background. I really wish our listeners could see what we could see right now. You're putting our backgrounds to shame, that's for sure.
I do like a bit of pink neon.
I love it. Who doesn't love a bit of pink neon? Would you be able to just tell us a little bit about how you became the pitch guy?
Absolutely, yeah. So my background's actually as an artist and a musician. All I ever really wanted to be was a rock star. Uh, you know, Small ambition there. Didn't work out, but I studied fine art at university, and then I went to teach fine art, and I ended up being a bit of a graphic designer because there's not a lot of money being a struggling artist or musician, of course, and I had kids and that kind of thing. So I ended up joining the real world of business and doing graphic design and UX and kind of website stuff. And I was at a particular firm, and this is probably about 15 years ago now. And my boss at the time said, I think you might be really good at sales. And I said, absolutely not. It's just not what I imagined my life doing, from rock star to salesperson. And I don't know about you both, but when people talk about salespeople, you kind of conjure up this image of shiny suits and shiny shoes and people trying to essentially manipulate you out of selling you some dodgy deal. And this just didn't align with my values. But I agreed in the end anyway, because he was persistent. And so I joined this sales team, and I was terrible. I was absolutely awful. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't enjoy myself. I was trying to copy what everyone else was doing. And I kind of immersed myself into this situation of what I call busy work. Just do as much work as often as possible, and at least it might look like you're doing a good job. But I was getting really, really miserable. And someone told me a story one day. And I'll tell you the story now quickly. It was the story of British Rail. And in 1979, British Rail were publicly owned by the government, and they had a big problem. Their trains were late, their trains were filthy, their customer service was terrible. And they decided in their wisdom that the way to fix this would to spend a huge amount of money on an advertising campaign. Fine. So at the time, Saatchi and Saatchi were the Goliath of the advertising world. They just helped Margaret Thatcher become prime minister a couple of years before. And if you wanted a great advertising campaign, you'd go to Saatchi and Saatchi. But there's procurement rules just like today. So they had to invite some other agencies to come along and pitch as well. And one of these agencies was this new agency called ABM, and it was run by this guy called Peter Marsh. And his background was actually amateur dramatics. He was a theatre guy. And he knew if he had to have any chance of winning this work, he had to do something really, really disruptive. So the day of the pitch came, and the British Rail people turned up at this little agency, and they rang the buzzer, and no one answered the door. And so they rang the buzzer again, and it was only after about 3 minutes that they even got let into the building. So they were already kind of frustrated at this point. And they approached the receptionist, and she was at the desk, and she was on the phone at the time, and she was annoyed that they had interrupted her, and she kind of waved them away to this waiting area in this agency. And they get to this waiting area, and there's dirty coffee cups, and there's old magazines and newspapers, and there's ashtrays overspilling with stinking cigarette ends. And they wait again. And after a few minutes, the British Rail guy stands up and he approaches the receptionist. And this time she's filing her nails and she just shrugs at them. and they go, "We've had enough. We're leaving. This is ridiculous." Essentially, we're off to Saatchi and Saatchi, thank you very much. But just as they were about to leave the room, the founder, Peter Marsh, burst through the double doors and he said, "Gentlemen, you have just experienced how your customers feel every single day. Now let's see what we can do to put it right." And in this one
Wow.
moment, he'd given them this paradigm shift. He'd immersed them in this world of their customers that they hadn't even been aware of. And it started getting me thinking, a pitch doesn't have to be a PowerPoint presentation. A pitch can be any method that you can think of to entertain and persuade an audience by any means. So that was a little interlude story there, but essentially I heard that story and I started reading everything I could about pitches, all of the pitches that have ever happened in the world, and it got me onto some really interesting side tributary topics as well, like amateur dramatics, like psychology, like how emotions are formed, persuasion, creativity, all of these things, many, many topics kind of feed into this thing that is the 1 hour in the room or less when you've got to pitch your thing to an audience. And so for years I did this and I experimented and I made mistakes and I got better. And eventually I joined IBM about 7 years ago now, and where I founded what we call the experiential selling team. And my job is now to create these pitches for our clients to give them an experience and make these emotional connections. And on the side, I started doing some social media thing, and I thought, everybody's got to be known for something. You're the something guy. I'm the pitch guy. So that's what I went with.
Brilliant. And it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it, really?
Right, exactly.
Oh, that's amazing. Brilliant story. And why did you decide to write the book? And how do you think it's going to help writers to successfully pitch their work?
I mean, the idea for writing the book was quite personal because I remembered where I was all of those years ago when I started out in sales, and I had no clue what I was doing. And people are starting in that position every single day. And so I wanted to write the book that I wish I had had all of those years ago, based on all of these tributaries of knowledge and experience that I had learning along the way. But to your point, the book is not directed at salespeople specifically. It's for everyone because we're always pitching. We're always presenting ourselves, whether we're doing a speech at a wedding, whether we're trying to convince our partner to go for the Chinese takeaway instead of the pizza. We're pitching in every aspect of our lives, and of course, as writers, a huge part of our job is to pitch because you can have a fantastic idea. You can have the best idea in the world, but unless you're able to convey and inspire and excite somebody else, then it's never going to see the light of day. So the book really, I think, takes people through all of the stages of pitching, through research, through preparation, through structuring information, through how emotions and psychology play a fact, through to creating experiences and storytelling, of course, is a huge part of this as well.
And why do you think people fear pitching? What holds us back?
Well, I think nerves is a big factor. Lots of people get nervous. In fact, most people get nervous. You're a bit weird if you don't get nervous. If you know you're going to meet a potential editor or literary agent or you're going to have a moment in time where you're either going to come out successful or not successful, then it's nerve-wracking. And I think people sometimes prefer not to even put themselves into that situation. But there's really good news because nerves is something that we can deal with. And there's a chapter in the book about simple things like breathing techniques, about your mental state, the things you can say to yourselves, the poses you can stand in, the way you get yourself ready. So you are reducing those nerves. But we always want to have a little bit of nerves because we always want to have that bit of extra spark and energy when we're there. So I think nerves is one thing. Um, but the other thing is just not knowing how to do it because it's not a topic that gets taught in schools, and I actually think it probably should be. But someone says, you know, you write a book or you write a synopsis, and someone says, "Okay, I'll see you for a meeting." Most people don't know what to do in that meeting. They either prepare lots of busy work or they wing it and hope that they can answer questions, and it's not the way to persuade someone. So the idea of the book is to really help people prepare for any big meeting, any pitch presentation in their life so that they're going to come away feeling successful and feeling great about themselves.
So if someone was pitching a novel, for example, how would they externalize the themes within it, especially if they're not a confident salesperson?
So I think firstly, in terms of the confidence, this is something that people have as a misconception, I think. People think, well, I'm not very confident. I'm not the kind of person to get up on stage. I'm definitely not a salesperson. And I mean, these are all traits of the kind of stereotypical writer personality. I'm a extroverted introvert. I like doing things like this, but I also like mostly being at home on my own, writing a book with classical music on, right? So what people have to remember though is that the audience isn't expecting you to be this brash, bold, confident used car salesman. They just want you to be yourself. So if you're not confident, that's okay. You don't have to pretend to be confident. In fact, the key here is to be authentic and to be your real, vulnerable, authentic self, because that is what an audience wants to see, and that is what's going to create an emotional connection. So, in terms of externalizing the themes, I think you've got to give some of the information of your book, of course, but again, people make a mistake where they think, right, I'm going to list all of the information and then I'm going to throw it at the person listening. Here's all of the things you're going to learn, etc., etc. And what's more powerful, I think, is a story, a true story about yourself. Why did you write the book? I think that's a great question. I think, it's one that you've asked me, and maybe some people might find my story interesting, but you've got to look inside yourself and be open to vulnerability. And all of a sudden, it becomes a lot easier as well because you're not trying to memorize a fact sheet. You're just saying, look, I think there's this problem in the world. It's affected me, and I know it affects other people in this way. But I think there is a better way. I've got this vision where everyone in the world is no longer nervous about pitching, and audiences are no longer bored out of their minds watching 100-page PowerPoint presentations. And this is why I wrote this book. I think it can change the world. I haven't even said what's in any of the chapters, but you're probably, hopefully, thinking, well, this sounds good, and maybe I'd quite like to read it for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sold. And I completely agree about the authenticity part of a pitch, because we actually went to, well, had a team strategy day not so long ago, and one of the guys had to do a presentation about some data, and he was visibly very nervous, bless him.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope he doesn't listen to this podcast and I'm outing him. But as soon as he turned around and said, "I'm sorry, I'm shaking, I'm really nervous," like, please excuse the fact that I'm tripping over my words and that I might be speaking really fast or really slow and I'm sweating.
Yeah.
And as soon as he said that, he was fine. The fact that he admitted it and was like, you know what, I'm just going to embrace the fact that I'm absolutely bricking it right now. Like, I'm stood in front of all these important people talking about all this data that I've found, and I'm scared. That's the fact that he admitted that and just accepted it. It made him get on with the presentation so much easier because he was ignoring the fact that he was
Yeah.
nervous.
It also creates this emotional connection with the audience because an audience doesn't want to see super slicked, polished salesperson. We don't need Tony Robbins. We need you. And I think that the second you say, okay, give me a minute, please. I'm really nervous. the key is you see yourself in that person, and that's the empathic emotional connection there. Because how many times have I sat in an audience and thought, I'd be so nervous if I was about to go up on stage right now? Because we all get nervous. So be honest, and that's how you create this connection. And then your audience will like you, they'll warm to you. And you've got to remember that your audience wants you to do well. It might not feel like it. It might feel like your audience are waiting for any mistake to kind of scoff at you, but that's in your head. It's not true at all. Everyone wants to just have a good time and they want to see people doing well. So it's really a mindset shift.
Yeah, absolutely. People say it all the time, don't they? You buy into a person, not a concept or a business. And that was I used to work for an agency, and that was one of the things that we always kind of had drilled into us was that if your client likes you as a human being and you're asking them how their weekend was and talking to them about what they got their wife for Christmas, they are much more likely to stay on working with you because they will feel personally attached to you and they won't want to cancel whether they like your work or not. They won't want to leave because they like you, and I think it's
100%.
so important.
Now, there's a slight nuance to that, if I may, and that is that there's this thing that we've all prone to called cognitive dissonance. And this is essentially where our heart and emotion feels one way about something, but our rational brain actually holds a different opinion. So we're in conflict with ourselves. And as an audience, if I'm being sold something, if I like you more than the competitor, but I like the competitor's proposition more, then it's difficult to make the decision. And I think that what you must do is you've got to have a good proposition, but the key is in the order of how you do this. So create the emotional connection first, ask the questions about their Christmas and kids and make them like you. And then they're going to want to hear the facts and figures so that they don't have cognitive dissonance. They're going to want to hear the information, the proof, so they can go away feeling whole, thinking, well, I loved those guys and their proposition. They proved to me was just fantastic. So that's the order. Emotion first, information second.
Very helpful for our listeners, so thank you for that little insider tip there. And what is the most common mistakes you see people making when it comes to pitching?
Well, I think we've talked about a few already, which is thinking that you need to give as much information as possible, thinking that doing as much work as possible is the way forwards, and not thinking about stories and emotional uh, connections as well. But I think people don't prepare themselves enough in terms of rehearsing. So rehearsal is huge. People often think, well, I don't want to rehearse too much because I want to have this super special spark on the day. You know, I hear this all the time, and that's wrong. No, rehearse, 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 rehearse. The other thing people forget to do is breathe. I think whenever you start a pitch or a presentation, you can really make a big impact by not saying anything for the first 5 seconds. And that's actually a brilliant little window for you to just, when you're up there or in the room, just take a couple of deep breaths so you're not don't have a dry mouth and you're not running at 100 miles an hour, and just kind of ground yourself in the room and then start talking. And I think the third big mistake that people make is that they see pitch as a one-way communication. You've given me half an hour, so I'm going to talk at you for half an hour. And actually, again, the way we make these emotional connections is through conversation, and it's through listening as well. So we've got to be asking questions of our audience, and we've got to be listening to what they're saying and trying to answer their questions and adapt their concerns into that half an hour or hour of time that we've got. So you got to plan for that. Half of it being a conversation, half of it being presenting information.
Brilliant. And how do you think people could flip their mindset and begin to enjoy the process a little bit more?
So the way I think about this as a pitch is, if you're not enjoying yourself, then the audience isn't enjoying themselves. So the mindset shift for me is, imagine you were planning a surprise birthday party for your best friend, and you just can't wait for them to come into the room and see the decorations and see the people there and enjoy this experience that you've created. We can do that in a pitch. Maybe even forget about PowerPoint altogether, forget about computers altogether. Think, can I tell a story? Can I bring a prop? Can I pretend that when we've stepped into this room, the year is actually 1982 with a few little things on the wall, and encourage the audience's imagination. And when you start to think at this bigger experience way of pitching, then it does become that enjoyable, exciting thing that you actually look forward to the reaction from your audience. You'll still be nervous, but that's the mindset shift for me. How can I do a pitch that the audience goes home in the evening and they tell their wife, husband, kids around the dinner table, you'll never guess what happened to me at work today because it's so different from the usual dirge that they have to sit through.
Definitely. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to come away from this podcast feeling really optimistic and hopefully having some inspiration and motivation to get these pitches right and doing it in a bit more of a unconventional way and just working with it with a bit of fun behind it instead of, like you say,
Absolutely.
just doing a PowerPoint presentation. So hopefully lots of people will go away and create their pitches and get their book deals.
I hope so too.
Yeah, you've given us so much advice there, but if you had to pick one top piece of advice for someone pitching their book, what would you choose?
Be brave. Be courageous enough to be yourself. Think about the topic of your book and why it excites you and how you could somehow create an experience that excites your audience as well. And then don't talk yourself out of it. Try it. Be brave enough to go ahead and do this slightly crazy thing that you think, well, I don't think people normally do this because that's what's going to get you remembered out of the sea of aspiring authors that these publishers and agents sit through every single day. You've got to be brave enough to do something that sticks out and they remember.
Amazing. So this is your first book. Do you have any plans to write more?
I do. I got lots of plans actually, but my wonderful editor Louisa has been on a sabbatical for 3 months, and she went the day after the book launch. It was only a couple of months ago. So when she's back, we're going to sit down, and I've got lots of ideas. I think I've definitely got the writing bug.
Oh, brilliant.
It's very exciting. Look forward to seeing what you come up with next. And we always end by asking for a book recommendation. Is there something that you've read recently that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Can I share two?
Absolutely.
So I read a lot of non-fiction. I think that's really important because I'm always trying to be a better person. I'm always working on the different aspects of myself, whether that's confidence or anxiety or not having a clear path of what to do next or finances. One book I read fairly recently is High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard. And it's really a manual for how to make small changes in your life to be more happy, to be more efficient, to be more proactive, to be more successful. And that was a really good read for me. I do like to read fiction as well, but we haven't got time for that. But a kind of a historic fiction book I read recently is Beyond by Stephen Walker. It's not really fiction, but it's the story of the US versus Soviet space race in the 60s and the difference between the kind of American astronauts who were treated like Hollywood celebrities and the Russian cosmonauts, which were kind of not treated very well at all, and how they sent monkeys into space. And there's all sorts of amazing stories, and it's real, but the way that he writes it is like a gripping novel. So I think everyone needs to listen or read to that.
Two brilliant book recommendations there, so thank you for those, and thank you so much, Danny, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Write Club. And if anybody wants to go and pick up Danny's book, it is out now. It's called Pitch, and we fully recommend going out and grabbing a copy.
Amazing. Good luck. Happy pitching. Anyone who picks up a copy, feel free to get in touch with me. LinkedIn on my website, pitchguy.co.uk. I always love to hear a good pitch story.
Brilliant. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Write Club. We hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to keep writing. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at Writers Online, your go-to for writing tips, competitions, and exclusive updates. Plus, you'll never miss an episode of the Write Club. Until next time, happy writing.